Right then, so this was the board challenge that no one had time for. So we're going to do a quick review of it now. Yeah, just a couple of points in it that I wanted to make you aware of because it's a very popular still interview question, especially with people who are more from HR and things like that as opposed to actually technical guys themselves. They seem to love asking the question, so what's an IFI? What's an immediately invoked function expression? So that was your first clue in the beginner challenge, this IIFE, what does it mean? So an immediately invoked function expression. So yeah, let's run it first and see what errors we get, and then we'll work through it systematically, yeah? So running that, it returns something. It returns marathon finishers because we've defined it up here, but it returns it just as a function itself, yeah? Because we've assigned the inner function to the variable marathon finishers. So in other words, to access the stuff inside it, we actually need to invoke that function first. We need to run that function first. And how we do that is through the use of an IFI, through the use of an immediately invoked function expression. So does anyone know now how we would write an immediately invoked function expression?
Yeah, we can use the parentheses.
Yes, we can wrap the whole thing in parentheses. So that's the start of the function, and I believe it ends here, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then to actually call a function is the same as before. Give it another set of parentheses. So that has now turned it into an immediately invoked function expression. As soon as we've declared it, it will be invoked because the JavaScript code runs through it, sees a function. Oh, I'm going to declare that function, but because we've wrapped it in these parentheses, it's actually going to invoke it as well. So on the first run through, that will get actually invoked. So if I run the code now, sorry, question Viv, yeah?
So does it mean that we need to invoke at the bottom for marathon finishes?
Yeah, so we're going to come to that bit in a minute, but now if we invoke it, it's just going to do that weird thing, right? Marathon functions is not a function. Because we've invoked it now, so we've already stored it in memory. So yeah, the function declaration, if you like, is no longer there, just the result of it. So just the inner code now exists in memory. Yeah? So what we wanted to do really was just increment the number of finishers, yeah? That's what this inner function's trying to do, is trying to increment the number of finishers. Say every time a marathon runner crosses the line, that inner function will get triggered and increment, something like that, yeah? It wasn't a perfect example, but it was just to give us an idea of playing with these things. Cool, so instead now, yeah, we actually want to invoke something more like what I've got in the comment below, yeah? We actually want to try and invoke that inner function, which is how many finished. So if we try that, we get another error, assignment to constant variable. So it's highlighted the line that is giving us the error for that. So that's because we've used the plus plus on finished, and finished has been declared as a constant, yes? We can't redeclare it. And remember that the plus plus is just shorthand for finished equals finish plus one, yeah? So yeah, obviously there are a couple of ways to do that, but the easiest way is just to change that from a const to a let, yeah? Let's run it again. So that gets 3. So that's still, it's working now. We've got a working function, but that's a little common bug as well that people do. They want to increment something and return the result of that increment. But the issue is where we put the plus plus. So if we actually wanted to return 4, which is finish plus 1, what would we have to do? Yeah, so this plus plus now has to come to the beginning. So that plus plus now has to come to there. And when we run it, we get 4 instead. Yeah, so quite a few little steps to that one for a beginner one, but previously you'd been acing all our board challenges, so I thought let's give you something a little bit harder. Maybe I did a bit overkill there and did it too much introduced at once, but yeah, at least when you go for an interview, they're not necessarily expecting you to know everything. It's more about how you approach the problem and they want to see your thought process. Are you approaching it a logical way? So sort of like how I did, we tried invoking it first. That was an error. So therefore, how do we fix that error? Yeah, and then we had another one. So another error. Keep just working through it step by step and explain as much as you can as you go through. Yeah, so that was it really for the beginner one.
So could you just maybe leave it for 1 minute?
Leave it for 1 minute. Yeah.
Can we put errors like, try, catch, block, and like on error just silence it, do nothing? Like, because I'm thinking how to.
So this was a
solve
board.
error
This was a
issue.
board challenge. Yeah.
no,
So
I put in the try and catch, error, do nothing.
okay, but we wanted it to do something. Yeah. So rather than put error handlers and just say don't run this function because it's wrong, let's try and fix it and make it get the result we want. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Cool. So yeah, I was just saying for those that come in a little bit after we started, then we had to do various things to this. The first issue we had was marathon finishers was not a function. Oh no, it wasn't. The first issue we had was it just returned a function itself rather than what was inside of it. So the clue was the iffy. We had to immediately invoke our function expression. We did that with the parentheses wrapped around the function, and then the other set of parentheses to invoke it. That enabled us to run that function. Then we could have access to what was inside of it, which was the function we actually wanted to run, which was how many finished. So often JavaScript libraries would have been invoked like this. They would have wrapped their whole library in an immediately invoked function expression, so you had access to all of their functions in it. Things like underscore, but those utility libraries, they would have wrapped all their utility functions in an immediately invoked function expression. So whack, you just got all that in memory ready to use, all of these inner functions in the library. Yeah, so that's why it's still quite a popular interview question, I think, and you'll see quite a lot of legacy code using things like these immediately invoked function expressions. Yeah. We had to change the plus plus as well for the guys that come in late. So it wasn't incrementing as expected because we had finished plus plus rather than plus plus finished. So that means we returned 3 rather than 4. Little things like that. So there are a few little errors, you just had to work through them sequentially. So if you miss,
Finish plus plus not increment.
because the plus plus happens afterwards, yeah? So you're going to return finished and then you're going to increment the finished variable if it was there.
Oh.
Yeah, so instead we wanted to increment the finished variable first and then return it. Yeah. Alright. So that was the beginner, effectively. If you need to review it again, it's on YouTube, but yeah, there we go. So, the intermediate one. So there's a similar principle with just a few extra steps involved. So we had some really funky looking code with brackets and parentheses everywhere to begin with in the intermediate one. We also had this interesting looking exclamation mark up there. That was, I think, a terrible clue to say that you also probably want to invoke this as a immediately invoked function expression. So hopefully you got that from the beginner one and you'd be able to transfer it across to get access to these inner functions here. So doing something like that will actually immediately invoke the function as well. It doesn't work with all functions, it's a really dodgy way to do it, so I don't advise you doing that at all, but it's just a little clue that if I did run that, then we are going to invoke what's inside of it and get the console log getting spat out. Yeah.
So what's the meaning of the exclamation mark?
Yeah. Again, it's the true meaning, right? It's to turn the function into an expression rather than into a function itself. So it's still the not operator, but you could use any I think they're called unary operators there. But it's a terrible way to do it. It was just a clue to try and don't use that way at all. It's just a clue to try and get you to make this an immediately invoked function expression as well. So again, we could wrap everything in parentheses. Return, bump. So that one, probably change that as well, right? To the return statement. And that's going to be our closing initial one. Yeah, it's going to match up with the marathon finishers function. So then we'll wrap that and invoke it. Cool. And again, if we just ran that now, let's see where we're at. Okay, uncaught reference error, the marathon finisher is not defined because it's marathon finishers, right? Now marathon finishers is not a function because we've already invoked it, yeah? It's not a function. So therefore we want to get access to one of these inner functions. Yeah, so let's test the first one first. Get finish runners. We don't expect any arguments in this one. So will it still run if I leave them in? Should get an error. But it's not using anything. It's not using any arguments. Don't think that was there to begin with. Yeah, so it still runs. It just returns our finish there. So it just ignores these things that we passed in as if they weren't there because we're not using them in the function. It doesn't stop the code from running. It's pointless, but it doesn't stop the code from running. But if instead we wanted to get the updated list of finishers, we actually want to add some runners onto it. Let's say we want to add a female runner, number 22, and a male runner, number 63. So we could add them on to our list of finishers, yeah? So if we try that, is it going to work or is it going to fail? And why is it going to fail? Who said that, sorry?
But it's gonna return exactly the same, no? You are not
Sorry,
passing
if I use get updated finishers instead, yeah. If I call get updated finishers instead,
You should show those and the ones up there. We will fall together.
so it's trying to concat just finished, yeah? Anyway, let's run it. Okay, so same issue as before to begin with, yeah? We're trying to assign to a constant. So we've got finished as a constant and we're trying to assign to a constant. So what's the, well, there's a couple of ways to fix that.
So the way you can fix that is if you pass that two arguments to marathon the finishers, no?
So change the select.
Because in marathon the finishers, you have just find this finisher, no? Which is like an argument.
Yeah.
So if you pass to marathon the finishers, those two.
But marathon.finishers doesn't exist anymore, yeah? Because we've immediately invoked it. Yeah, marathon finishers is now not a function.
Get update finishers doesn't receive any arguments.
Okay, cool. So you're saying we need an argument there, yeah? In get updated finishers.
Or in this case, as you are concatenating just finisher, which is the argument of the function of marathon of finisher, which is anonymous function, you can pass it to marathon of finishers, no? I mean those arguments.
Pass what? Just finished to marathon.finish.
To marathon of finishers, yes. Like just finish, yes. No? Or not really?
I don't think so, Walter. I might not have clearly understood what you meant, but no, I don't think
If
that's
you
correct.
pass to just the finish, one argument doesn't overread this finish.
So let's deal with one issue at a time. So let's deal with the type error first. Assignment to a constant variable. So we could do the same as before. Change it to a let. That would fix that error. Yeah? But then we're also we're adding on undefined, which is not what we wanted.
It's not taking the argument to assign.
It's not getting the argument because we're passing it to marathon finishers, and marathon finishers no longer exist. That hasn't been stored. So we need to actually pass it down here to the function that's going to use it. If we try that now, it should add on something at least. Yeah? So now it adds on W22. It adds on the first one. So we had 2 arguments and it concatenated one thing. Yeah? So again, a couple of ways to fix that. We could either pass our arguments as an array. This was definitely a challenge to just see what you guys come up with because there were multiple ways of solving it. And that would work. Or, if we left the arguments as they were, we could use the spread operator there, yeah, which will gather all the arguments into array and then concatenate that. Yeah, so there are a couple of ways of doing that again to get that updated finishers list. If I wanted to leave this as a const, how else could I change that? So how else could I change get updated finishers? Because we're still getting that error again now, right? We're getting assignment. We can't reassign, so there's an issue with this line.
Can we do push?
We could do push. Let's say I want to use concat, but yeah, if you do push, so you're going to do finish.push, yeah, like that, and then,
Yeah, you remove the assignment.
but then you've just pushed an array rather than pushing the individual elements of the array. So again, you'd have to what? Spread them like that. So that's, yeah, you could have used push. Let's try not to use the modifying methods. So let's try and use the more modern concat. Say again? New set. Could do, but so what does concat return?
It returns merged array.
It returns the merged array, so why don't we just return finish.concat itself rather than trying to reassign it? Let's just return the new merged array. Yeah, that also works. No, I said if we want to keep concat, but yeah, never mind. Yeah, so the main learning points, I guess, in both of those exercises were just understanding what an IFI does and how it's invoked, and then if you've got these inner functions, how do you access them if the outer function hasn't been run yet? Yeah, so you can invoke that outer function to get access to the inner stuff. And then just a few revision things like revising concat and revising const reassignment and the plus operator as well. Cool, but anyway, yeah, as no one really got time for that, then that's taken a back seat. So I understand you've had a lot of other things to get on with, so no worries. But that's an extra example there, at least for going through at a later date. So I can send the snippets over. What both? Do you want both the completed version, or do you want just the? Yeah, I'll give you both versions, right? And then you can play around with it and just use it as an extra lesson. What's that? It's on YouTube, yeah, I've streamed this as well, but I didn't want to take too long because I know you've got a lot of other stuff on this afternoon, so I wanted to keep it fairly short, and it gives you half an hour just to prepare for the presentations this afternoon. Yeah? And if anyone's stuck on anything, just give us a shout and I'll come around and help you. we've got a few presentations, but I'll come to you as well, definitely put them. Okay. Any other questions, guys, or leave it there? Thank you.